Today, I'm dressed cozy because I'm feeling a little cozy, and I want to talk about just the 90's, dude. The 90's, where I came from when it came to video games. I got this idea from someone in the Discord. They were actually commenting on Cup 9, which I think Cup 9 was a great one, talking about nostalgia. If you haven't watched Cup 9, then that's what it's about. And I personally think that the nostalgia conversation deserves a second go because I might have been misunderstood when it comes to how I feel about it. Someone wrote, "This is the most depressing video you've made yet," because it seemed like I was being negative about the whole thing, and it's not that I was. It's not that I don't think nostalgia exists. I do. I definitely believe that nostalgia exists. I just personally believe that there was a lot that played into it. I know that me personally, when I go back and play some of these games that I grew up playing, there's an element of the magic that isn't there. And someone else commented that it's, maybe good sometimes just to remember them and let that memory be the magic and maybe not try to relive the magic as much as originally we thought it was. Because if we're going to be honest, you can't relive the magic of a game like, I don't know, Mario 64, which I've told the story before, but I'll tell it again because it's a memory that is like a warm hug. The weather's been cooling down here. It's fall time, and so we're getting to a point where it's just time to cuddle up, get cozy, and play some of our favorite video games. And for me, some of them are, ones that I've played before, but also getting into newer ones. Now, before we get too far into it, I'm going to talk about what I'm drinking today. We're going down a different road. Usually I don't go this way first, but I have a Sumatra. And Sumatras are not historic. I say historically a lot. I don't mean it that way. Sumatras are coffees that we find being used in, decaf coffees. Often, you'll find a Sumatra being decaffeinated through a different process that we can talk about at one point. Also, if you guys are into more coffee conversations, let me know. I would love to share that. This is not going to be a coffee channel, like dedicated coffee channel. Someone's like, "You should make one." I'm like, I don't know if I have the ability to manage more than one thing, but I wouldn't mind bringing coffee into this a little bit more and bringing the chemistry and the science behind coffee because that's my background. But anyway, this is a Sumatra by, I believe this is Novo. I'm not familiar with this roaster at all. I get all of my coffee through Trade Coffee. I don't have any partnership with them. I will put a link in the description because if you sign up through that link, I get credit and then you get credit. And basically, if more people sign up for the service, then this coffee gets paid for, so that supports the channel. That's kind of cool. Because right now I'm spending like $100 a month because I buy a lot of coffee. Not because that's not the subscription cost. It's just that's how much I drink. Peach, cedar, and grapefruit seem to be the tasting notes. I've had this black. I don't love it black, but maybe with milk and sugar. If I haven't had it with milk and sugar, maybe it'll be more delicious. Now I realize now that I don't have my actual brew method. We're going Kalita again, so let me go grab that. I also took a look in the mirror and saw that this actually doesn't look good when it comes to lighting, so we're going to change that real quick. There we go, microphone back in the other spot. I'm seeing more people do this. It's pretty cool, the whole microphone on the hat. It's a really smart way to go about it because then you don't have to deal with your clothes moving. But anyway, I want to say hello, good morning to our good friend Henry. Good morning, Henry. He seems to be well behaved today. No longer on the juice, which is good. I like that we have an additional person here, or not person, but plant. I swear there's nothing in my coffee. It's just normal everyday coffee. But it's good to have Henry here. Guys, I'm going to do my best here to make this the least YouTubery as possible. I kind of refer to these as the anti-YouTube videos. Not anti-YouTube like against YouTube, but like the anti or the opposite of what a YouTube video should be. And I'm going to do my best not to use YouTuber things like make sure you like and subscribe. I'm not going to say those things. I am going to request, though, multiple times, sometimes in a video and other times, towards the end, commenting in a specific way. Because I think that this is a good back and forth. You guys have been leaving such meaningful comments, and it makes me feel really good, and it is very, very encouraging. My daughter's waking up. I can hear it. Which means we might have a visitor. I'm not sure. Only time will tell. You guys have been extremely encouraging. But for this video specifically, I'm going to be sharing with you a group of memories that I have from my past and some of the most joyful things that I've experienced with gaming. And I would love for you to do that as well. In fact, if you share those memories, my next cup of coffee is going to be me reading those memories out for everyone else. I'm going to get a collection of them, and I'll read them, print them out, and then read them off paper and kind of just get excited about it. So you'll be showcased in the next cup of coffee if, you read it out. Because I think that this back and forth that exists, that I'm seemingly creating here on in these videos is going to be really good, especially when we talk about something like gaming and our memories. So if you've been watching my videos, I've mentioned a few games multiple times and shared these stories multiple times as well. And so you're going to have to forgive me if you feel like I'm repeating myself, because I most definitely am. But, there might be some that I haven't shared before. This is going to be a collection of about half a dozen stories from my childhood of playing specific video games. And I'm treating these cups like a new beginning. I still have everything on my channel. I haven't unlisted anything. As of right now, I don't plan on delisting anything because I don't think that that's necessary. But I will say that stories I may have told, I'm going to tell again. Maybe just with a different inflection, because again, this is supposed to just be me sharing as if we're sitting across the table from each other, which is why there's this table here. And I realized I don't have a dump cup. Also below, I think that this mug is for sale. I'm not sure, but I think it is. So the 90s and early 2000s is when I played video games. Nintendo was primarily the console of choice for me because my father at the time, he worked for Nintendo, or not worked for, but worked alongside Nintendo as a private contractor. And so he was able to get me Nintendo games. And one of the first games that I ever played, which I'm not going to share this story as in detail because I've shared it so many times, was Super Mario Land 2, which recently, by recently I mean when it came to the system with the Game Boy emulator, an expansion pack, I replayed that game with the 8-bit-do arcade stick, and I thought that that was the coolest experience, something that I definitely would never have done growing up because arcade sticks weren't really a thing that people used. And so that was a really fun experience. But that game was one that my father introduced me to, and it was so special because when Nintendo said that they were bringing the Game Boy back to the Nintendo Switch, I got to basically add my dad to my family plan and be like, hey, you can play this game now. And so it was like just a full circle. But that game was that was a pretty big deal for me, and I will remember that experience forever. But the game that game number 2, the game that kind of changed the way that I liked to loved video game was Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo. Now, I didn't have the actual Super Mario World cartridge. I actually had Super Mario All-Stars with Super Mario World added to it. And so it was this amalgamation of all of the best. I don't know if that's the proper word to use. I haven't been caffeinated yet. I've just only had my aminos and my electrolytes. It was this amalgamation of all the different Mario games that were popular. Or not popular, but I guess that had come out. Super Mario Brothers 2, which was the weirdest, and still I think to date is one of the weirdest. Although Super Mario Land 2 is pretty weird. It's an interesting game. If you haven't played it, it's on your Switch. Try it out. Let me know how you like it. It's like a 3-hour game, 2 hours actually. It's very quick, and the boss is not Bowser. The baddie isn't Bowser. It's actually And I can tell you, you should play it and see who the baddie is. And then let me know how you feel about it in the comments, because I'm very curious. And if you want to have more personal conversations with me, Discord's the way to do it. Discord's open to anybody. We have very strict rules in there as far as appropriateness. So while it is open to everybody, if you come in there and you don't conduct yourself in an appropriate manner, then you're out. So on that note, that seems harsh, but I believe it makes the community very safe. And so we're able to maintain a very, very safe environment for everybody. We have all age ranges there, although I believe a lot of people are closer to my age, give or take 5 years. And that makes sense because the average age of a gamer is actually in their 30s, because we're the people who gaming was created for back in the early 90s and late 80s, early 90s. That's the thing that I think a lot of people forget is like, oh, video games are for kids. Now, while video games are indeed being made for children, it's not that video games are always only for children. If you think about it, video games were originally released in the mid-80s, early 90s, at least mid-80s. Mid-80s is actually a safe bet because the NES came out in the 84? What is that? It was 84? But mid-80s, early 90s was really when the gaming boom happened, and gamers grew up, right? Me, I'm a gamer. I was born in 89, but I, as a gamer, progressed and continued to grow up. And so in doing so, arguably grew up. And in doing so, gaming has actually aged with me. Whereas back in that time period, certain games appealed to me. As I grew up, we're seeing more games appealing to people in their 30s, which makes sense. Or, in our case of nostalgia, going back and remaking games from that time period, such as Super Mario RPG, which we'll be getting here just in, I guess, a week or two. Now, going back to the memory, Super Mario World, I played that game to death. It took me a long time to beat it because at that age, I was not very good at video games, and we had a very, very strict rule in our house because we lived in a neighborhood where playing outside was very possible, where I couldn't play video games unless it was either A, raining, or B, video game time. And so living in Washington, I still got extra video game time because it rained a lot. But still, we were outside a lot. So I didn't get to just sit for days on end playing video games. It was a very strict rule in our house. And not until we moved. That's great. That's a great balance. I like that. Let me see if I can taste, because I put the milk and sugar in before tasting the coffee. So let me see if I can taste the coffee. Yeah, it's there. That's nice. And someone commented, you need to cut the slurps out. Guys, this is like we're sitting across from each other. I would do this if we were at a coffee shop. It's not rude. You are spraying your mouth with the liquid to taste it fully. That's delicious. That's really good. Milk and sugar and coffee is delicious. It's its own beverage. I drink coffee black 85% of the time, but sometimes just putting a little milk and sugar tastes great. And so very good here. Super Mario World was, and still is to me, my favorite game ever. I know I've talked about Final Fantasy 16 and my extreme liking for that game, but Super Mario World is just so special because of it being a game at a time in my life where gaming was cool. Like, I was the cool kid on the block because I had the Super Nintendo. And then after Super Mario World came something that I never thought in my wildest of dreams I would ever experience, and that was Super Mario 64. Super Mario 64 was not only a game-changing experience, but a life-changing experience. When that game released, or was going to be released, we had a friend who worked at Nintendo. And that individual was a good friend of my father's. They're still good friends. And he brought over what I would assume to be a dev kit, right? This was the 90s. I don't know what they were called. But essentially, it was an unmarked briefcase or box. I don't remember exactly. My memory's foggy. But we weren't able to see the actual hardware. Yet, we got to play it. And I remember shape-shifting Mario's face, and holy smokes, guys. It was in that moment that I knew that this thing that I was doing, video games, was special. And I can't say that I ever thought that I'd be in the position I am today where I get to make videos about video games and have these conversations about video games. But I can tell you that in that moment, I knew that video games were going to be a lifelong thing. They were going to be something I always interacted with because it was something special. It was important. And so Super Mario 64 was incredible, and it led to other games. And so once we ended up getting our own Nintendo 64. I'm not sure how we got it, but we got a Nintendo 64, and there were a few games that came with it. I had Mario 64, of course, that my father and I used to play. Same way. He had his own save file. I had my own save file. And if you guys have seen me start a new save, you see me using the last save file. That was the way that my father and I played. He would have first save file, and I would have last save file. Now, some save files have infinite, like if you're on PlayStation and the memory cards or whatever, back in PS1, PS2 times, it's whatever. It's just the next slot. But if there's ever a game where there's 3, 4, whatever, you will always find my main save, the last save file. And that's just the way it is. So that's probably going to be, my wife's texting me, would you like some children? Let me respond to her real quick. In 15 minutes when I'm done recording. There we go. Yeah, I'm always the last save file. And so I have always, that was the thing. Back to the Mario story. So we got the Super Mario 64, Wave Race, 1080 snowboarding. Those are like the power 3 that I played a lot of. 1080 was a huge one for me. I loved 1080 snowboarding. And then there were some really weird ones. These are Jet Force Gemini was one, which I believe is a game that people do know. Another one that a lot of people don't know about is something called Buck Bumble. It was a first person, or maybe it was a third person. You were a bee, and it was a shooter. I liked Buck Bumble. I thought it was a great game. It was fun. GoldenEye, Super Smash Brothers, or Smash Brothers. I have the cartridge somewhere, but Smash Brothers. Those were the games that I had on my console. I only had 2 controllers. Oh, and Star Fox. We got Star Fox. Oh, dudes. Remember Blockbuster? We got Star Fox because it was like, you could get one game this year. What do you want? And I had to have Star Fox because it came with the Rumble Pack. I don't think it was the only game to come with a Rumble Pack. Maybe it was, but I think it was the first to introduce the Rumble Pack. And so I had Star Fox 64 with the Rumble Pack, and I was the coolest kid on the block because of that. And I remember it being such a special game. I still love that game. People are like, oh, that game didn't hold up, dude. Suck it. That game held up fine. It is fun. I love playing that game. And then the next game that changed me. I would say that it was the first game that affected me on an emotional level. This sounds so dramatic, but you know what? It's the truth. Was Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time was something so special. Now, I hadn't played anything Zelda-wise since Link's Awakening. I did not play A Link to the Past until I was much older. That was not a game I had on my Super Nintendo. The actual game I had on my Super Nintendo that was similar to that in a way, but not really, was Chrono Trigger. I actually saw the two, and I thought Chrono Trigger would be a better option for me, and I am not disappointed with that decision. I don't think there's anything wrong. I don't think that one's better than the other, but I'm very happy that at a young age I got introduced to Chrono Trigger because I believe it led me to love one of the games I'm going to mention later. And so, Ocarina of Time, I remember being scared at times, and at this point I was living in not Washington, I was living in Illinois. We lived in an apartment complex. It was only 2 apartments. It was owned by the mission organization that my parents were starting to work for. And so we were in a part of the city that wasn't necessarily the best. We weren't really supposed to go outside and play because the area was questionable. And so we were inside all the time. And in Chicago, that makes sense because in the summertime, it's gross, and in the wintertime, it's cold. So you have very few moments where you can play outside like we did as kids in Washington State, where though it rains, it's pretty agreeable most of the time. And so we were inside all the time, and this is where my development and my love for playing video games really took root. Because I played Nintendo 64 all the time. I had a next door neighbor who also had Nintendo 64, and I would borrow games from time to time. They had way more than I did. Way more than I did. But I, started to really get into, and I was older, right? I was 9, 10, and so video games were a little bit more accessible to me. Back when I lived in Washington, I only lived in Washington until I was 8. And so the games that I played weren't overly complicated. But in Chicago, well, I say Chicago, but it wasn't Chicago proper. It was somewhere outside of Chicago. But in Illinois, it was a lot of Ocarina of Time, more Star Fox, of course, and GoldenEye, but then getting deeper into stuff like Turok, and which was a game I wasn't supposed to have, but I had it. Turok, and then more like, do you guys remember Gecko? That was a weird one. That was a fun one. In Donkey Kong 64, which I've seen people really like to crap on. Dude, again, just sit down. Crapping on, it didn't age well. Who cares, dude? It was a snapshot in time. Good Lord Almighty. Stop looking at games today as if they should be compared to games today. They shouldn't. Donkey Kong 64 may not age well, but it was such a great game when it came out. I loved it. I loved that game when it came out. It was so fun. It was so special. And anyone, specifically the younger gamers that are just like, dude, these games sucked. I don't know why you like them. Dude, shut up. It's not that they suck. It's that there was a time period. And us older folks can easily say that a lot of things from this generation suck, but they don't suck. They're just different from what we're used to, right? Oh, the music's awful. Where's the good music? The music's different from what we're used to. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, the artists aren't talented. I don't know, and I don't understand the appeal. Doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't, right? But moving back to the games, a little rant, a little JD rant, a little old man JD rant. I think old people and young people should just calm down. Let things exist in their time period. I think it's very important because they led to some of the greatest games that we end up having today. And if it wasn't for Donkey Kong 64, then with Seth Rogen's depiction of Donkey Kong on the Mario movie came out and the rap dropped, we would not have had that feeling that all of us had. That rap that was from Donkey Kong 64. Remember that. Oh, man. So special. But anyway, I was playing a lot of that, and there was this gentleman that would come over and hang out with us at our place because my dad was going to Moody Bible Institute. And so it was someone from his class would come over, and he was kind of studying and discipling him and stuff like that, and he played video games with me. He was awesome. Because we were inside. We went from a cul-de-sac life, the Sandlot life, to stuck inside all the time. And I was very, very upset with my family because we had to move from Washington. I didn't understand. I was very young. And so my dad would bring over some of the classmates from his classes to hang out with me and my family. Now, some of these classmates also worked for the mission organization my father was working for, so some of it was like staff meetings and stuff. But these people would play video games with me, and it was such a fun time, and it was a way that I got to socialize and got to actually develop some of these social skills because it was a language that I was learning. I was learning how to talk to people about a subject because I didn't have any other subjects to talk to them about because I was an outside kid growing up. And so the game after Ocarina of Time was Majora's Mask. And I thought that Majora's Mask, my memories of Majora's Mask was the first time that I felt disappointment with a game. I got Majora's Mask. I got the expansion pack. I got to play that game, which led me to be able to play stuff like Donkey Kong because that required the expansion pack. And I remember playing Ocarina of Time, not Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and I had the guide. I was the guy who would go and purchase the game with the Primus guide for $10 because you could purchase the game with a Primus guide. Primus, yeah, dude, or Primus, I believe. Primus is the band. Primus guide. I think I don't remember the other one. Let me know in the comments what the other one was. I think it starts with like a T or a U. I don't remember. But I remember playing Majora's Mask and thinking to myself, this just isn't what I wanted it to be. I don't like this clock mechanic. And it was the first time that I experienced this feeling of maybe not everything is what I like. Maybe a franchise might take a direction because it was the first, because Mario has never been a linear thing for me. Oh, it's a sequel. It's not. It's just a different Mario game. But Zelda was the first time that I felt the sequel change because Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask felt like Majora's Mask should be a sequel to Ocarina of Time, and it just wasn't what I was expecting. So I never finished it. And to date, I can honestly tell you, I've still never finished it. I've never beat Majora's Mask. Maybe something I should do sometime. But the next game for me that was a big one was Final Fantasy IX. I got my hands on a PlayStation 1. And I played Final Fantasy IX and Tekken a lot. I loved Tekken. I thought that Yoshimitsu was the coolest. I got a PlayStation 1 and I had a friend who, his dad didn't think that burning copies of games was all that bad, so I had a modded one. And I played so many games. So many games, but the one that stuck out was Final Fantasy IX. It was the first Final Fantasy proper game I played, and I was like, this is like Chrono Trigger. This is cool. The story is long. There's 4 discs, and my love for PlayStation began. Because from Ocarina of Time and those games, I went to Final Fantasy. And then my Nintendo experience went handheld. I played Pokemon. I played lots of games on my Game Boy and Game Boy Advance, and that's where all of my Nintendo love went. Because after that, I had PlayStation 1. We had now moved to California, which I still reside in, and I was now at PlayStation 2 because I had a PlayStation 1 until I had my bar mitzvah. Once I had my bar mitzvah, I purchased a PlayStation 2 with that money, a CRT TV, a 12-inch CRT TV, and I was able to play video games in my bedroom. And so I had a Game Boy Advance, a PlayStation 2, and a GameCube. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I had all of them. I had every console I wanted. Xbox was not one I ever considered because I was a Mac guy. And at the time, the Mac versus PC thing was real. Microsoft was the enemy. And so I didn't want to touch anything Microsoft made because it just wasn't worth it to me. And Dreamcast, all Dreamcast was for me, all I knew of it was Dead or Alive boobies. And I'm like, I can't play that. Even though I know that Sonic was on there, but Sonic was never something that I was into. So I never played any of the Sonic games. And so it was GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Game Boy Advance. And that, my friends, is where my life began. I played games like Final Fantasy X, Kingdom Hearts. These games changed the way that I thought about video games. I played games like Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, Advanced Wars, these games on my Game Boy, Mega Man Battle Network, some of these special games that I'm playing again now, not as exciting as it was back then. The Pokemon franchise was really big to me because me and my friends would play Pokemon. These games were so good. Golden Sun, Fire Emblem. I was obsessed with these games. And they were games I shared with my friends. And they were story-based games. I never got into multiplayer games. And I'm playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 right now. And I'm enjoying the hell out of it. It is so much fun. But I haven't started to play those games until more recently. I gotta finish my coffee because I told my wife 15 minutes. And so as time progressed, my love for video games did as well. And where I really found myself at home was in long-form story-based narrative games. And to date, it still is exactly where I like to be. I play 2 multiplayer games pretty consistently. One is Fortnite. I don't know what it is about it. Maybe it was because it was the game I played right after my car accident, and I was in a really dark place, but my friend played with me, and I felt like I knew I had someone with me, someone who was in the car accident with me. and it was something special. So that game has a place in my heart. And I met, one of my best friends, Chase, through playing that game together. But Call of Duty is now a multiplayer game that I am enjoying. And those are the two that I play. But when it comes to anything else, the story is everything. And I like sharing that story with other people. In fact, I'm going to play Final Fantasy 16 again with someone in our chat, Dean. He purchased it based on recommendation from me, or my excitement for it. I think part of it was that. And so he's going to play it for the first time, and I'm going to play it for the second time in the Final Fantasy mode, and I'm excited to play it. But if there's something that I could hit home here, it's that playing games with other people really was where my love for video games flourished. And one of my favorite memories from my teenage years was going over to my buddy's house for the weekend. We slept over at his house for 2 days, and we played nonstop Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles on his GameCube with our Game Boys attached. And I thought that was the coolest experience. I will never forget that moment. They may never even think about it, but for me it was so special because I got to play with my 3 other best friends, and we played all night and all day long. The only other game that I did that with was something that was a arcade game, Gauntlet Legends, on my N64. I thought that was the coolest game. It was so much fun, but it was always about playing with other people. And I think that the idea that multiplayer games are the only games you can play with other people is horse crap. Single-player narrative games should be played with other people. There's stories that you can share with other people. And so I've created haphazardly this gaming book club where we play single-player narrative-based games, but all together monthly. I've done a terrible job at keeping it up, and it was based on channel memberships. And because this shift has changed some of the things that I'm doing, this is something I want to build out to be very robust. And so it is going to exist. December is going to be the first game announced, and it will be all done through Patreon. Okay, that is going to be my Patreon, and it's going to be how I add value. Now, it is going to cost, I think, $5 a month. And that is 100% because it is the only viable way I can see that making an income from doing this is possible. And it is why I'm doing it. Okay? Being fully transparent here. Not trying to hide anything. The amount of time I want to spend on that is high. The amount of time I spend on making these videos has decreased. We're just talking. It's great. No editing, no thought process. I sit down, make a cup of coffee, let the caffeine run through my veins, we can chat. But that is going to be $5, and we can all play games together through that. I'm not going to hide the game from people to try to make it a paywall. I'll make it public what I'm playing. But if you want to be a part of that super special group and the conversations there will be exclusive videos that I post to Patreon. And so that's going to be that. I love video games. I love it so much. I love being a father. I love sharing video games with my daughter, my son eventually when he gets old enough, and my wife plays video games too from time to time, but nothing like what I do. I love sharing them with you guys. And I hope that moving forward, we can do a lot of that together. These are just some of the stories that affected me on a level that I think about almost daily. I would love to hear yours so I can share them with everyone else and read them on here while drinking my cup of coffee. How special would that be? So please, share them in the comments below. I hear my family. I'm going to go hang out with them. Finish my coffee. That was delicious. And as always, guys, happy gaming.